Bury an old water tower to use as an emergency shelter. Sure, what could go wrong with that? TLDR, lotto winner neighbor asks my dad and friends to help him bury a water tower under his house to use as an emergency shelter. They know it's a stupid idea, but lotto guy offers up big money. Rains come and tower gets pushed up through the floor, destroying the house. So this actually happened to my dad a few years ago. He lived in an area right along the Texas-Oklahoma border in a fairly rural area. My dad primarily worked in pipeline construction. One day my dad noticed someone had purchased a very large property not too far down the road. Turns out that the new neighbor was actually from the suburbs around Columbus, Ohio, and had just won a lottery prize. The man hadn't won the jackpot but had won a smaller prize around $2 million. My dad was also originally from Ohio, so he decided to say hello. A few days later, he meets the lotto neighbor. We'll call him Jim. Jim starts telling my dad about his dream to build his own self-sustaining homestead far away from the rest of society. Jim was very interested in prepping and convinced of a soon-to-come global societal collapse. He used his lotto winning to purchase the land and begin building his homestead. My dad honestly didn't find this that odd because many people in the area had some tendency toward independence, and those prepping shows were popular at the time. About a year later, Jim reached out to my dad to ask for help with a construction project that involves burying a large water tower in the ground. My dad is a little confused but decided to go take a look. Turns out Jim bought an old water tower, about 15 feet in diameter and about 15 high, for the purpose of reusing it as an underground shelter. Jim had recently completed the build of a prefab home on his property and wanted the water tower buried partially under the new home with a trapdoor built in a closet to access it. My dad immediately thought this was the dumbest thing he'd ever heard and proceeded to tell Jim all the potential issues with his plan. Jim cut him off and told my dad that his contractor for the home had basically told him the same. And so had several others he'd contacted to try get them to bury this water tower. However, Jim believed this was simply laziness on their part and had the utmost confidence in his plan. My dad left, but a day or so later Jim contacts him again and asks about paying my dad to let him rent some construction equipment he had on his own property. My dad again goes over with him what a bad idea this is and how no legitimate crew would ever do this for him. Jim brings up using my dad's equipment and illegal laborers. My dad decides, well, if he's determined, might as well make a few bucks off lotto winner Jim. He quotes him some ridiculous price to rent his equipment and says he can ask a guy at work he knows about gathering up a group of Mexican day laborers. Jim agrees to the crazy price, and my dad gets in touch with a Mexican friend who had a crew of day laborers. A bit later, my dad asks his friend about how the project is going. He tells my dad how nasty Jim treated the workers, how stupid the whole plan is, and how his specifications for how he wanted this built were completed idiotic. Whenever they'd offer up suggestions or point out why something he wanted was wrong, he'd essentially shut them down and use a bunch of slurs for Mexicans. So they buried the water tower and built this secret entrance exactly as he wanted, knowing it was completely stupid. He mentioned they only completed the job because Jim was paying them way more than they were used to making. Everyone agreed Jim was a jerk, but all the more reason to gouge your prices and take his money. A year or so goes by when my dad gets a frantic call from Jim. It had rained quite a bit, which was unusual for the area, and now the entire ground floor area of the back of his home was bowed upward about 2 feet. My dad goes to Jim's and takes a look around, realizing what has happened. Given that they had essentially just buried a large hollow object underneath his home, the rain caused the water tower to be pushed upward and right through his first floor. My dad explained the situation, and Jim immediately lost it, starting ranting about how he should have never used those Mexican laborers and how he was gonna make them come fix it. My dad mentioned how that was probably impossible since most of them go back and forth across the border, but Jim was livid. My dad later found out from Jim that his insurance would not cover the damage to his home because he had buried a water tower under it without telling anyone. He mentioned trying to sue the insurance company, but that went nowhere. He also tried numerous times to find the day laborers, but was told you get what you get when you hire illegal workers to do a project that would never have gotten a permit. Over the months afterward, there was a lot of fallout for Jim, and he couldn't even live in his home due to the damage. It eventually was torn down to be able to remove the water tower from beneath it. He burned through his lotto winnings pretty fast, so he didn't have anything left to rebuild it. He ended up selling the land and moving away about a year later.
A hairy malicious compliance with a wholesome ending. DLDR at the end. My partner and I were planning a visit. We have both been comparing our body hair progress in lockdown via video, and, well, I think our chat is self-explanatory. Me, if you want to keep growing your beard, you do you. It's fun. Do you want me to shave my legs? Them, no, you do whatever you want to do to make you feel good. Me, do you like them now? I will keep them hairy if you like them. Them, is it strange to say I like both? I hate making decisions for myself, so malicious compliance. I prepare for their visit and shave just one leg. My legs were very hairy. Let me make this clear. My pale-ass legs look like lint rollers used on my cat. It looks absolutely ridiculous, but I am now committed to the compliance. They come over, and I sit next to them on the sofa. I've worn shorts in the winter especially for the occasion, and plonk my legs on their lap. They don't immediately notice and are stroking the leg that was closer to them and said, "I like this leg," and I flipped the other leg on top and announced, "But do you like this leg too?" They looked so shocked, but then bust out laughing, saying, "I can't believe you did that." It turns out they did like it though anyway, so my malicious intent didn't land. But I thought y'all might appreciate a happy ending for once. Proof plus cat tags. DLDR, my partner tells me to shave one leg and leave the other very hairy, so I do. Edit spelling. Thank you for awards to folks. Edit. I'm not going to reply to any more comments about pronouns, as it's impossible to tell the bigots from the people who genuinely haven't come across they in a singular form before. For the latter, LMGTFY. My partner's preferred pronouns are him and both of us, and many of our friend group make a habit of using gender-neutral pronouns when we're talking about people the audience doesn't know. It's a small way to normalize and practice its use.
Cheapo consignment store. Many years ago, when our first son was a toddler, my wife was shopping in a consignment store for kids' stuff. She happened to see a lady bringing in a bunch of stuff to sell to the store and overheard the conversation. This woman had multiple bags of Thomas the Tank Engine toys and track, as well as one of the train tables. If it was new on the shelf, it would be several $100s worth of stuff. The employee working there offered her a lowball offer, saying $100 is the most I can offer. Do you think you can get more? You are going to have to find a buyer yourself. My son was a huge Thomas the Tank Engine fan, and my wife's eyes lit up. My bargain-hunting wife immediately went over and said, "I think you just found a buyer. Will you take $200 for all of it?" The employee got mad and said they weren't allowed to conduct business inside the store, so my wife helped her carry it out to the parking lot and gave her $200 for a ridiculous number of Thomas the Tank Engine toys that my son, and eventually his younger 3 siblings, played with for years.
Ed, tired of answering questions, declares next answer will be a no. So this happened at least 30 years ago, so the wording isn't exact. Cast is dad, my dad, sister, my older by 3 years sister, and myself. I would guess I was about 12 or 13, so my sister was about 15 or 16. Names have been changed because honestly I don't remember all the names. My friends and I were trying to plan a day night out. We were going to go to a movie, and as this was before cell phones and 3-way calling, it involved a lot of phone calls between a group of preteens and a lot of changing circumstances. I went to the living room where my dad was sitting reading a book. Me, Dad, Katie, Becky, and I want to go see random movie title tonight. Is that okay? Dad, yes. Goes back to reading his book. I go call a friend and tell them about 10 minutes later. Me, Katie's mom can take us. Can you pick us up? Dad, yes. Goes back to reading his book. I go call a friend and tell them about 10 minutes later. Me, Becky's mom said she can pick us up. If your mom can take us, since Katie's mom need to take Katie's sister to her friend's house now. Is that okay? Dad, yes. Goes back to reading his book. I go call a friend and tell them about 10 minutes later. Me, okay, so now Jill wants to go too. Can we pick her up too? My sister walks up to ask about going out with her friends. Dad, in a slightly frustrated but still teasing tone, Yes, but the next question someone asks me, the answer is no. I am tired of saying yes. Sister thinks for a minute. Dad, would you mind if I go over to Susie's house? Big grin. Dad starts laughing, though. Dad says the next answer is no. Sister words her question so that the no is a yes.
Let me know in the comments what other subreddits you want to hear stories from.